The next tangram puzzle we're going to be working with is this second artboard called Firecracker. This Firecracker shape combines three types of shapes. We've got squares and rectangles, similar to the one before. We've got a square here, a perfect square, and then these two long rectangles crossing to make an X. We've got four circles, here, here, and here. And then we've got all these triangles. So I got a triangle here, 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 and they all kind of, what's it called, connect to one another to make a bunch of different triangles. Let's first start with our shapes. Let's start with this square that's kind of wrapping around everything in the middle. I can make a square using the same rectangle tool as the first tangram. I'm going to click here in the top left corner and I'm going to drag to the bottom right. Now, you'll remember in the last tangram we used the shift key to keep things in the same line. Another use of the shift key is a way to draw or resize a shape and make sure it keeps the same proportions. So right now I'm holding my shift key and I'm dragging my square to the bottom right. And because I'm holding shift, I know that it's a perfect square no matter how far out I bring it. If I wasn't holding shift, I could be making a long rectangle, I could be making a short rectangle. It would all get kind of messed up. But because I'm holding shift, I can make sure that it is a perfect square, same length on each side, like that. So there's our square, and I can see the fill, and it looks great because it's the same on all four sides. But one thing I don't like is that now it's covering this image beneath it, and I still had, four other shapes that I needed to work on. Right now the fill is in white, but one thing that you can do in Illustrator is you can make shapes have no fill or have a transparent fill. So right now, I've got my fill selected, and then below it, we have this small icon. These are like our quick fills that we can change our shapes to be. And this one on the bottom right is always going to stay the same. You're always going to have the option of making a shape you have no fill or no stroke. So I'm going to click on this little red hyphen, and now my square that I drew no longer has that white fill. It's no longer covering what was beneath it. It's transparent and I can see right through it. What I'm going to do next is work on my four circles. So if I go here, right now in my toolbar, it doesn't look like I have a circle tool, and that's because it's hidden, because they're all kind of grouped here. So if I go select and then go to ellipse, you can also hit L on your keyboard. Now I have the option of making circles, ovals, and ellipses. So now that I have my circle tool selected, what I'm going to do is hover over the top left corner of my circle. So I'm going to imagine if this line continued here, and if this line here continued to the left, that's going to be where I start. Just like in my square, where I started in the top left and moved to the bottom right. I'm going to click and drag, and just like our square, where if you held down shift, you could get a perfect square. If you hold down shift while creating a circle or ellipse, holding down shift will make sure that it is a perfect circle each time. I'm going to let go, and there is my first circle, and it looks great. So now that I have this one circle, I know that these other circles are all the same height and width, so I can just hit Command C to copy, Command V to paste, and then again Command C to copy, Command V to paste. One more time, Command C to copy, Command V to paste. So there's my four circles. And now what I want to do is get this shape, this rectangle and this rectangle, and I gotta get them to cross. I'm going to grab my rectangle I'm going to click, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle that I think is the right width and height as these two. Okay. That looks, to me, my eye says that that's pretty close. And what I'm going to do now is once I've created it, I am going to hover around the bounding box, just like in Photoshop. If you hover around it, you get these two arrows that kind of hug the corner. I can click it and I can drag it to rotate it around. Now what I want to do is make sure that this rectangle rotates at a nice 45-degree angle, because that's what those two rectangles are on. Right now we're learning so many different uses of the Shift key. So here it is. If I click around the bounding box while I have this huggy arrow, and if I hold down Shift, it's going to rotate this shape so it's at a 45-degree angle every time. So rather than if I'm not holding Shift, and I could kind of rotate it and it'll be every degree in between, when you're holding Shift, it's always going to rotate it to 45 degrees. Now that I have that, I can take this shape, and if I use my V selection tool, my general select tool, I can click it, and now I can try to match the width and height of the rectangle beneath it. Right now, it looks like my width is actually pretty good. I did a pretty good job of measuring that just by eye. But this part, this length of it, is not quite matching. What I'm going to do, similar to my tablespoon, I'm going to use my direct selection tool, or hit A. Click on this path here, because this is the path that I want to extend. I'm going to click it, and I'm going to drag it and try to match it here. And what I'm also going to do is hold down Shift, because this is yet another use of Shift, where if you are clicking and dragging a path, it's going to continue at the same angle that this whole shape is originally drawn at, in this case 45 degrees. Clicking and dragging it, and there it is. Now what I'm going to do is hit V to select this shape, Command C, Command V, and I'm going to rotate it by holding down Shift, and then have it match the rectangle beneath it. So there we go. Now I've got these 5 shapes. 6 shapes. What am I doing? I can't even count. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this and select this other one, and I'm going to turn them into an X by using the Unite option that we had in our first tangram. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to select all of these shapes. Right now I have this square, which I drew first, and then all of these shapes that are right now above it. I'll show you here in the layers. If you go in this layer, and we go into layer 1, you can see the outline of all the shapes I just created. Here, if I click this, you can, it'll be hidden. There's that square that we first drew. On top of it is that first circle, the second circle, so on and so forth, and then here's that X that we did. Now if I click and drag these, I can kind of rearrange the order, but just know that the bottom shape, or the ones that are closer to the bottom, are below the other shapes that are on top of it. I'm going to go back to my Pathfinder tab, and I'm going to select all of these shapes here. I'm going to use this next function, which is called minus front. What minus front does is it looks at the very, very bottom shape you have. In this case, I've got this square at the very, very bottom, and it's going to take all of the other shapes that are sitting on top of it, and it's going to cut away from this bottom shape using the shapes above it. So imagine like this is one big cookie sheet. This is like a one square cookie sheet. And these 4 circle paths that I drew, those were all like circular cookie cutters. So these are 4 circle cookie cutters that I'm cutting in to this square cookie sheet. And I also had this like X cookie cutter, which I'm going to use to cut into that. So let's try this right now. So I'm going to hover over all of it and hit minus front. And one thing you'll notice that before I had all these blue squares in the middle of all my shapes. But when you hit minus front, I no longer have that because this is all one shape right now. If I click and drag it, this is now essentially a compound path where I can't move any of the other shapes that I've created. So now this is looking great. If I were to click it, and if I were to hit I for eyedropper, or go to the left and go to the eyedropper tool, and match the same appearance as this swatch to the left, that looks pretty good. Okay, I got the square and these shapes around it. But the last thing that I gotta do is get these triangles. Looks like I've got a set of 5, 10, 15, 20 triangles that I need to have going around this shape. So what I'm gonna do is go to my shapes, and I'm gonna look at it and I'll see that I don't actually have a triangle tool. But what I do have is something much more flexible, and that's the polygon tool. So if I select my polygon tool and then click and drag out, you'll be like so confused because you'll see that there's this hexagon, and that is not the triangle that I promised you. So if I click my polygon tool, and rather than clicking and dragging, I'm just gonna click, and then it's gonna come up with this little toggle here, where it lets me set the sides. It was originally at 6, but I'm gonna bring it down to 3 because I'm working with a 3-sided triangle. And I'm going to change the radius to, let's do 20. I think that'll be a good number to work with. Great. So now I'm going to go to my selection tool with V. I'm going to click this triangle, and I'm going to get it to match this first triangle in the row. All right, now that's set up, I'm going to click this triangle, and I'm going to hit Command C to copy it. Now I could hit Command V to paste it, and if I do that, it's just going to paste it in the middle of my screen. But another way to get this triangle and the next triangle and the next one after that closer to this first one is by hitting Command F, which is this key, or this command here, paste in front. You'll see that it doesn't appear that anything happened, but if I click and drag this triangle, beneath it will reveal the original triangle, and now I've got 2, and by using paste in front, these 2 triangles were all close to each other, and they're all in the same line. So if I hit Command C again and then hit Command F, and I drag this one over, you'll notice I've got these magenta lines. Those are kind of guiding me. And the one on the left is telling me that I'm within the same line as the original. And now I've got this other one appearing vertically that's telling me I'm centered. I'm going to hit Command C one more time while selecting this middle one. And then hit Command F to paste in front. And I can also use the Shift tool. Right now I'm holding down Shift. And now it's making it so this shape, when I'm moving it, is within the same line as the original one that I just created. There we go. Command C one more time, Command F to paste in front, and there's that last triangle in the row. Beautiful. So I've got my 5 triangles in a line. What I'm going to do is now go to my selection tool with V, and I'm going to hover just the triangle. So I'm not going to hover to include anything else. just the tips of these triangles. And then I'm going to go to my Pathfinder, and I'm going to go back to my Unite, which I used in the tablespoon tangram. There's that first one. And now these triangles combine to create a mountain range. Now that I have this mountain range, I'm going to hit Command C to copy it, and I'm going to hit Command V to paste it. And now I'm going to use my selection tool. I should have this bounding box with these white squares around it. And if I hover around it, I get these huggy corners, just like Photoshop. It's going to let me rotate it, and I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. I'm also going to hold down Shift, because that Shift is going to let me rotate it and keep it at a nice 45, 90, or 180 degree angle. And I'm going to bring it there. And now I've got my two mountain ranges on top and on bottom. Almost there. I'm going to select this one using my selection tool, or V, and I'm going to hold down Shift to grab this other mountain range. I'm going to hit copy, and then I'm going to hit Command F to paste another instance of it in front of it. So I have two sets of these mountain ranges. You can't see them because one's on top of the other. But if I were to go to my huggy corners around the bounding box and rotate it, I should now have 4 sets of mountain ranges, and they're all centered around this X and these 4 circles. Beautiful. So now that you have this middle part, this cracker as I'm calling it, what I can do is use the selection tool, hover over everything, and then in the shape modes, I'm going to unite everything once more. And now I have one beautiful compound shape. It's all together as one shape. And I'm going to select it, hit I for eyedropper over here, and then I'm going to re-click on that swatch. So now my tangram is all one beautiful compound path filled in with this gradient on the left. So that's our second tangram, the Firecracker, and that went over a bunch of different things, a lot of different ways to use Shift, ways to copy and paste in front, and 3 different types of shapes: our circle, our rectangle at a repeat, and then triangle or polygon tool.